Okay, but let's begin this Access to Innovation talk. First of all, good morning, everyone. And this is the first talk, A2i talk after the summer break. And as some of you may know, that we try with these talks to give you access to people that you may otherwise not have access to. And today we are fortunate to be in the company of Tue Nyboe Andersen, who will share his experiences on developing early stage companies in Zambia. Tue is the co-founder and managing director of Kukula Capital, and has been living in Zambia for many years. He's currently on a line from Denmark, so the technical thing should hopefully work. Just about a little bit about the formalities of today. So we have, first of all, a presentation about 20 minutes from Tue, and then we have usually around 15 to 20 minutes for questions, and we will finish no later than 10:15. So your questions, you can either post them in the chat, or you can also just ask them directly, or just jump in and ask your questions. Just to let you know, we are recording the session. We know that quite a lot of people who don't have time to listen to it now, they jump in later and listen to the recordings. I think that is it from my side. So let me give the word to you, Tue, and please go ahead.
Great, Thomas. Thank you so much. Yeah, nice to be here. My name is Tue Andersen, and I co-founded Kukula back in 2009. Prior to that, I worked as an intern for Confederation of Industry, and that's how I ended up in Zambia in the first place. Met a beautiful Zambian woman who is now my wife, and decided to settle in Zambia. So I've been in Zambia for the last 14 years, and basically following my internship in 2008, I basically applied for a grant from the NIDA, and they were kind of the main reason for Kukula happening, through an initial grant to set up Kukula and a Zambian venture fund. So that's a little bit about myself. I'm an economist by profession, worked a little bit in asset management in my younger part of my career, while I was still studying, but otherwise really an entrepreneur by heart, and so are my other partners in the company. So today I'll explain a little bit about firstly who we are, but more importantly some of the transactions we've done in Zambia in the SME space, where we've done about 16 investments in Zambian SMEs, and just try and draw a few high-level conclusions and recommendations based on our practical experiences. So let me just see how just to start off, a few pictures from some of our projects and our team in Lusaka and elsewhere in Zambia, just to give a little bit of a visual context. So in the top left picture is one of our real estate developments, the first kind of green housing development in Zambia, called Foxdale Court, where we have a number of green initiatives, solar, rainwater harvest, waste management, those type of things. The next picture is the CEO for Credit microfinance company, where we're 50% shareholder, and they do loans to SMEs in the mining supply chain. Next picture is from Post.net, where we have a controlling interest. It's a money transfer company and business services company. That was one of our first investments from 2011. Then down here we have a few pictures of some of our great team members in Lusaka from the Kukula team. Then we have a picture of our building material business up in Solwezi, which is a mining town in northwestern Zambia, which is really driven by some of the large copper mines. So there's companies like First Quantum Mineral, Barrick Gold, Canadian entity, etc., who have some large mines, and we've done, excuse me, a number of investments in the mining value chain. Last picture here is from our kind of green residential development, also in Lusaka, where we basically offer, you know, a green kind of safe environment, both in terms of a forest, but also in terms of some of the initiatives with solar power, with rainwater harvest systems, and those type of things. So that's just a little visual snapshot of what we've done. We have a lean but very incredible team. Maybe Thomas, if you can mute.
Silence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. A team of so basically myself and my business partner Niels are co-founders. We have another Danish shareholder who is member of the board, Jesper Vadum, and Charles, our board chairman, is a top lawyer in Lusaka, and then obviously the rest are some of our team members on the professional side, helping with our various activities, which is predominantly our venture investment or SME investments, but we also do corporate finance advisory relating to SMEs, and we do asset management. So it's really our core business, and what we've done for the last 12 years is really pretty much all around SME investments and impacts, either as direct investments or from an advisory angle. So to give a bit of just an overview of some of our investments, either as Kukula or in my direct capacity, then we've done basically 16 direct investments. When I say direct investments, is when we have equity. We've done another of debt transactions as well, but obviously not as relevant in this particular context of today. So just to run through very quickly so you get an idea of how broad it is. We've done a dairy business, which unfortunately didn't work out. We've done a building material company, which is supplying silica and concrete products mainly into the mining industry. We have a real estate business also in this mining sub-region. We used to have a furniture business together with a Danish NGO, actually, which also didn't work out. We have our residential real estate, Foxdale Forest. We have a microfinance company, IndiCredit. We have Post.net, financial services, basically payments services. We have a print solution company, which is a dealership for print equipment in Zambia and also a print shop. We have metal fabrication business also up in the mining area called Eagle, which has been sold about 3 years ago, but basically doing metal fabrication work for the mining supply chain. Then we had an agri business, basically a meat processing business called More Beef that was sold quite some time back in 2014. That was one of our early investments. Then we have an existing investment, a company called LiveClean, which is basically providing toilet and sanitation solutions in the mass kind of markets in and around Lusaka and also elsewhere in the country. So fee-paying toilet facilities. Then I'll come back to the last over here. We have .com Zambia. That's an e-payment technology business where we have a minority stake. Probably our best performing company in the portfolio, run by a very dynamic, strong Zambian entrepreneur. So basically doing payment solutions for markets, for road tolls, and also other different payment solutions. Then we have a real estate business, Foxdale Court, which is a commercial development. We have another microfinance company called BFC. And then lastly, we obviously have our main management company, Kukula Capital, and then the entity which actually I originally invested in and who was a part of Kukula in the early days, which is a small asset management company, more traditional asset management, not SME focused. So just to show, when I come to our some of the experiences we've had in SME investments in Zambia, it's quite diverse, and to be honest, probably slightly too diverse in terms of having maybe spread ourselves a little bit across too many sectors. But what it has given us has been some incredible learnings across multiple industries, you know, covering agriculture, manufacturing, technology, finance, manufacturing, building materials. So it's really very diverse in terms of the experiences we've had in Zambian SME investments. So I won't, I think, have time today to dive into more detail in some of the underlying companies, but really this is where some of the points that I'll raise in the next slide here is really coming from. So what are the key practical learnings that we've learned from Zambia? And I think for the context of this call, I would imagine, without being an expert on East African SME investments, but that it's quite similar challenges you'll find if you do investments in, let's say, Kenya or Tanzania, for example. But I would also say that Zambia is generally a really peaceful and relatively straightforward place to do business compared to some of the neighboring countries. So it, I think it'll give you an idea, but from a broader East African perspective. But our experience, just to be clear, is really purely related to doing business in Zambia. So if we start looking at a few shared characteristics from our successful investments, you know, some of our successful investments, probably the two most successful investment, if I should mention, would be it would be our the technology business .com Zambia, where they do basically technology, and hence it's a very scalable business context, business concepts, and run by a really dynamic entrepreneur. We have a company like IndiCredit, which is in SME short-term debt funding, very niche focused in terms of supplying short-term finance to SMEs in the mining supply chain, and also with quite a scalable business model. Then some of our real estate has been quite successful as well, even though it's not really scalable. I'll come back to that. But just to mention, you know, some of the practical businesses that has actually performed really well. So if we take the first point, scalability. So I think because there's a shortage of skilled labor in Zambia, scalability is crucial and way more critical in terms of the scalability of the business model than we had envisaged from the beginning. So because in a lot of businesses in this part of the world, you have quite attractive margins on your product. So a lot of things sounds exciting and interesting, but the problem is building a company at scale. And suddenly, I mean, we've had companies where we reached over 300 employees, then suddenly it becomes hugely challenges to manage the whole organization all the way down, so to speak, and finding the right middle management to structure that. And hence, you really want a scalable business model where you can drive it around systems and technology to enforce that kind of management structure. Or you need, maybe alternatively, a business model that is extremely practical and simple, where you'll, as a company, benefit from the relative cheap employees, so that you have the best from that angle, so to speak. But sometimes we've seen we'll end up a little bit in the middle, having, you know, let's say, advanced expensive equipment, but not the right skills, and then you end up, destroying your systems or your equipment, and suddenly you end up having just too many costs in that respect. Control. So I think this is an obvious point in any SME investment, but I think it's not so much about having, a controlling stake as an investor. It's really just having control with like-minded people and trusted partners. I think the example I gave with .com Zambia is good as well, where we have a minority stake, but there's another Dutch investor who has a minority stake, and then the founder is the main shareholder, but there's a few other minorities involved as well. But it's just a very interesting dynamic. We come with a certain role as, in terms of business development and strategy. We have a partner who's a specific technology investment fund, and then we have an amazing entrepreneur who works hard and knows his business and is really fighting for it. But so we don't actually have control in that company, even though it's probably one of our most successful SME investments. But it's really having trusted partners around and having very clear roles amongst ourselves as partners. Quick decision making. We've also seen in the investments that have been successful is, suddenly you have a curveball coming in, and you need to duck and dive and make a plan, and you need to be able to quickly transition the business. It's something we saw in one of our companies, for example, where literally overnight the existing business we were doing, which was in the retail of cement, failed because the dynamics in the market failed, and we had to pivot the business into a completely different angle within 3 to 6 months to make the business survive. That requires a lean board and quick decision making, and that is something we've seen on the flip side on some of the companies where there's been more challenges. Is if you have too complicated decision making processes, then you don't have time and you're not agile enough to move around and deal with the issues at hand. Number 4 has been practical management. You have to be extremely hands-on. You have to micromanage a business, especially in the SME segment, but even beyond the SME segment. Work extremely hard, as the founder or the CEO of our portfolio companies, but not just from a high-level management perspective. You need to understand also the operations of the business in these small companies, and I think it's obviously not different from elsewhere in the world, but I think it's that practical angle is really important in Zambia, in the SME segment, where you don't have a lot of subcontractors who are specialized in dealing with, let's say, technical matters. If I then move over to some of the shared characteristics from some of the less successful in investments, one of them I can mention, which was this dairy company, for example, where we literally completely underestimated the cash burn that was required to get the business to break even. Just the challenge, the unforeseen challenges, because of lack of information in some of these markets. It's really hard to make an investment budget and to understand what is the time to get to market, because you're introducing probably a new product in a new segment. You don't really know what the demand will be. There's no market research, etc. So definitely that has been a challenge in some of the companies. The flip side of what I said earlier, over complex decision making or lack of control has been a challenge. Wrong match in terms of partners. Sometimes and often it's to do with the business culture, how to run a company and what the priorities are. Sometimes it's also been in terms of what has been the exit horizon in an investment, where that has been a clash. But really that match, and again it's a no-brainer in any investment that there has to be a match among the partners. But that's an area where I think in some of the investments we should have analyzed a bit further. Then underestimating the difficulty of penetrating the market. I think we naively, when we started investing, thought that it was really just about, having the right product at the right price. It's not that simple, unfortunately. There's a lot of, informal rules going on. There's the challenge that new products. So, for example, in the mining area, introducing fresh milk into a market where they haven't been used to drinking fresh milk, even though it tastes better and was price competitive, the clients wasn't just queuing up to buy it, unfortunately, because there was no tradition for doing so. And similarly, in other transactions, we've seen that it's been way harder, even if you have a good product, to actually get into the market because of a lot of rigidity and informal rules about how to operate. So I think our experience has been you really need either focus on commodities where you can export and it's straightforward, or high margin niche products that where there's obviously limited competition. And then lastly, also avoid too much dealings with government. There's been a lot of historical challenges in terms of both on our supply side, where we had a timber company where the timber allocations didn't come through, which basically killed that entity. And on the sales side, and similar, we've also had challenges where in the, let's say in Denmark, selling to government is the safest thing you can do, and you get your money. In Zambia, it's not that simple. You have a bit more credit risk, and you end up spending a lot of resources dealing with credit collections that would not be the case in a more mature market. If I then take some of the overall learnings, I think some of them I've covered already, but it's really there's an information asymmetry and an information gap in these markets, and hence, but you can't really plug that gap. And our learning has been it's better start with a small pilot. So rather than doing huge evaluations and studies, whatever, you never really understand before you try it. So to do some pilot test offerings, and on the basis of that, decide on how to proceed with your business case. But even if you do it that way, you still need a huge provision for cost overrun in your investment budget. Exit has been a big challenge, even for some of our companies that are doing really well. Exiting an SME company with, let's say, $2 million turnover is really not easy, because there's no mature capital markets where you can do listings. And at the same time, having trade sales, you're looking more at once the investment is above $5-10 million, there's interest in the trade from the trade buyers. So that has been a challenge, and forward looking for a new fund that we're working on in the kind of renewable energy space. We are looking for slightly bigger transactions, as well as mezzanine transactions for the smaller entities, so that we have kind of self-liquidating mechanisms to avoid the situation with small companies that are hard to exit. Investment horizon, we've also seen, and this has also been covered by kind of global research, has been you are looking probably actually around 15 years is the sweet spot in terms of the investment horizon before you get an entity that is mature enough to exit. So that's where from research across Africa, you see that the returns actually peak after around 15 years, which is surprisingly long. Maybe last point from a general perspective, or from our perspective, has been you need to be able to step in and fill in gaps in some of these companies, because again, the inefficiencies of the job market, where specialized roles, you can't just quickly fill the gaps. So from the kind of top of my head, and from input from my business partners as well, then I would say these are some of the, again, super high level, but some of the key kind of learnings from the 12 years of investments.
Are you serious?
And then I think we just need
Nancy, you need to silence.
Just to mute everyone on the call.
Mute.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, I think basically now I speak on behalf of Zambia, so to speak. There are, if you can mitigate these risks, there's some amazing rewards. Basically, you have an incredible impact that you can create. Zambia and East African countries are in desperate need for jobs and improved livelihoods. Investments and new products can address that. Lastly, a country like Zambia is extremely well positioned in the green space, having some of the rare minerals for battery production, having water and solar and wind for hydro, and also being a major player in the agricultural sector for regenerative farming and those type of things. You can create an incredible impact. There's the first mover aspects where with technology and skills, there's a lot of opportunity to come in, especially kind of in more niche segments, but also broader than that. Lastly, on the growth side, these markets, including Zambia, are growing rapidly. We are seeing things pivot where for the last 5-10 years, the more mature markets in Europe, for example, has been booming. Africa has been a little bit more slow in terms of growth. We see a scenario now where Zambia is really taking off, where the rest of the world is slowing down. So I think it's a really exciting, interesting market. It's peaceful and relatively straightforward. So our overall experience with Zambia has been great. And beyond the experiences and the professional learnings, it's also just that it's incredibly exciting kind of a journey to be on. There is a lot of support generally for any investments in the SME space, and I think it provides a lot of personal reward, operating in this space. So yeah, with that, I'll end my presentation and we can take a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tue. This was highly interesting and highly valuable to us to hear these experiences. Just on a personal note, I can tell you that I meet a lot of impact investors here in Denmark who talk about what they intend to do. But I think you are the example of a person who've actually done it. So that just puts even more value to the things that you share. So please, everyone, maybe Tue, if you can close down your presentation, then we can see each other better. Yeah. Okay. So everyone, please pose a question in the chat or just raise your hand, and you can ask any question that you would like to Tue. In the meanwhile, I actually do have a question. Yeah. You mentioned this about the challenge of getting access to skilled workers. Can you maybe reflect a little bit about how are your recruitment process? Do you recruit through networks or do you go through agencies, and how do you go about the recruiting the right people?
Yeah, so basically it's a bit of a combination. For senior positions, we mainly work with recruitment companies, but someone also told me a good rule that every time you come across someone you're impressed of, then take note of the name and write it in a small book, so that in future, if you need to fill in a position, you have your own kind of mental database. So also trying to apply that, and also trying to just apply the principle that when you come across relevant and skilled and nice potential employees, or if you get what's it called, applications unsolicited coming through. If the skills are right, we try and see how we can accommodate it rather than wait for a position to open.
And once you have the skilled workers on board, is it possible to keep them on board, or is there a lot of kind of job transaction where people shift jobs?
Yeah, a bit, and that is sometimes a challenge, and especially that in Zambia there are a lot of kind of on the job learning, and so you will see a problem sometimes where you lose staff who gets offered significantly more, but it's just a matter of being competitive, I guess.
Okay, thank you. I see that we have a question from CBS. Shuhyun, if I pronounce your, sorry for the pronunciation of your name.
That's perfect. Thank you. Okay, so thank you for your presentation. I have two questions. So my first question is, I was wondering how you find a potential investing fund, and what's your criteria when you assess the fund that you decide to make an investment?
So we don't invest in funds, just to be clear, but how we find investments. So in the past and for the first many investments that we've done, it's really been a combination of us looking actively in certain industries, or business owners coming to us with an application and looking for funding. It's also been, for almost half of our companies, it's also been, we've just set up companies from scratch. So we've tried to find suitable partners to team up with, and then we've started the company and run with it. And then later on, we would recruit external management, etc. So we've tried a number of business models, also whether it's controlling or non-controlling. But in terms of the criteria, if I now look a bit more forward-looking, we're working on establishing and launching a new green investment fund, which will focus on renewable energy and e-mobility. And here we'll have the similar approach, because there's a small market for, formal market for M&A and formal transactions. It's not where in a more mature market you have your advisors basically working with the company and floating IAMs and those type of things. That doesn't really happen in Zambia. So it's a more informal networking. You have to be out there and be known that you're looking for investments, but it's really also that as a fund manager, we try to develop the projects we go into. So it's more driven from our side than just getting proposals in from companies or advisors, because we've tried that before, and that wasn't always successful. So we'd rather try and package a transaction from scratch. And because there's such a scarcity of finance in Zambia, we can try and package the transaction. I wouldn't say more or less on our terms, but at least how we would like to see it, and then go to relevant partners and structure it.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question from Carsten.
Yes, thank you, and thank you too for your presentation. I'm from Dentures 8 from the business unit in the headquarters in Copenhagen. We have NGO activities in Zambia together with our Norwegian colleagues from NCA. We operate through business partnerships and attract donor funding for value chains. So my question to you two, can you see any partnership or cooperation between private companies in Zambia and an NGO like us? What is our roles, and is there any opportunities to work together? Thank you.
Yeah, so definitely, I think we've had some experiences, and actually the first transaction we did was in this company called Jabulani Sawmill. It was structured, and that's basically a non-for-profit NGO, which was founded by the Danish Apostolic Church, and We then came in as a commercial funder through a royalty loan. We helped source some grants from Danida and a partnership with a Danish equipment supplier called Kalisø, and basically structured a transaction around that, which was really quite interesting. The challenge was a few years later that the timber allocations were dropped, and hence the transaction didn't work out. But my point is, we have tried something similar, and the partnership actually worked out really well, because everyone were aligned in terms of the impact story and that partnership. But due to other reasons, that particular transaction failed. So I do see potential for that, but it's more almost coming in directly as an impact investor, and helping to unlock a transaction. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Chabala, who's in Lusaka, and he's asking what type of innovation that is needed in Zambia right now. Can you kind of reflect on that?
That's a good question. Not easy to answer. There's a lead for quite a bit. I would say some of the major issues from a country perspective is a complete lack and gap of, scalable kind of software infrastructure on, running the company, so the country. So you'll find that a lot of when you deal with government, a lot of interactions are still very practical. A lot of reconciliations, you end up having to have almost like we have several employees who just deal with admin. So the cost of doing business is quite high, and there is somewhat a barrier to entry, because everything is just not integrated through an online portal, and then through that portal, all taxes, all government systems are fully integrated, the way it would be in Denmark, for example. So I think in terms of the innovation, it's obviously a bit of a big mouthful, but it's really having that overall integrated IT systems that speak together. So as a company, or even as an employee, an individual, then you don't drown in bureaucracy. And especially if you're an investor like us, where compliance is important, then you end up, our compliance check sheet is, I don't know if you can see here, it's like, the Excel sheet is extremely long, covering probably 35, 40 approvals and registrations or whatever for just one company. And then if you operate 10 different companies and you want to be compliant with everything, it's quite heavy. So I would say that's from overall perspective. Obviously, at individual company level, there's need for a lot of innovations where business can be optimized, and where Zambia needs to be more competitive. And that boils down to even simple things that we can see in our own sector, where a lot of stuff are done via Excel, and it should be in kind of integrated software systems. So I can't give any maybe specific good business ideas on innovations, but definitely there's a lot of things to be done, and the innovations is really to think about where are the problems and what problem can I solve, and what innovation is required for that. And if you think about it that way, Jabala, then I'm sure there'll be a lot of opportunities.
Jabala is also asking, at what stage do you support companies? What company development stage do you normally enter?
Well, so we used to also do startups. We don't do that anymore, but it would be more mature stage now, or could still be early stage, but with really trusted partners.
If we look at the companies in Access to Innovation, we support around 34 Danish companies wishing to enter markets in East Africa. And they kind of fall into two categories. Some of them are in the B2B market segment, and some of them in the B2C market segment. Mm. When I look at your portfolio, you had quite a lot of companies that were in the B2B. is it possible to argue that it's less risky to enter into a B2B market segment than a B2C, or is that a misperception?
No, that is 100% the case. I think you need really deep pockets if you enter the B2C space. It's incredibly hard to penetrate the market, and there's also a lot of logistical challenges in the B2C segment, at least with physical products, in terms of distribution and other challenges which you want to avoid. So I would definitely agree with that.
I have another question. In terms of penetrating the market and trying to kind of estimate the cost of that, a lot of our companies wish to kind of establish demonstration kind of projects where they can demonstrate some kind of product in the market so that customers can physically see it. Can you reflect, is that in your view is important as well before you actually enter the market?
Yeah, 100%. But the challenge you would also find is that unless the consumers believe that this is here to stay, then you might not see a particularly quick uptake. And we've seen some companies also from Denmark coming to Zambia thinking that it's just a 2-3 year time horizon, then everything is up and running, and they're beyond the cash burn, and that is rarely the case. We've seen, even as Kukula, that on the advisory side, for example, that it's taking us over 10 years to really build a name and an experience where we would be a trusted advisor on more significant transactions. So it's really having that, as I mentioned earlier, that long-term perspective. But I guess setting up a test plan and test practically, is there demand, would the product work? Of course, I mean that's a no-brainer, and I think that's a must, and you should do that. But then if you do decide to go in, you really need to set aside significant budget and be able to last for at least plus 5 years before you might see your breakthrough. But then once the breakthrough comes, one will be in a very comfortable position. But it does take a bit of time, because a lot of business dynamic, especially in the B2B space, is relationship based more than this part of the world.
Okay, thank you. We have one question from Kasper Akker, who's asking, how do you raise capital for your investments? So, I mean, our first SME investments were raised from it all started off with the usual friends, family, and fools. And then later on, we got a few institutional investors on board, IFU, and also a few Zambian pension funds, and a number of high net worth individuals from Denmark. And lastly, a big chunk from what's it called, the British donor, similar to Danida, as well as a family office from Belgium and one from Denmark. So that raised around $15 million in terms of direct investments that we then deployed into SMEs. Forward-looking, I would say it's more from more traditional institutional investors, but also family office with an impact angle that we're going to look for now that we go ahead with our new green SME fund. Okay, thank you. And just the last question with a quick answer. This is from Phil. Given the limited amount of information available, how do you conduct your research or your due diligence before making an investment? Yeah, you just have to dive in, get into the fields, and dig up the information yourself. That's the reality, and that's why that was very difficult to do in the beginning if you don't have a network across the market. But now that we have that network, it's easier to do some phone calls and figure out what's the situation from other companies on the ground, what are the numbers, etc.
and then obviously being in the field, speaking to customers. So it's really network based, trying to source that information yourself. That's how it has to be.
Okay. Time is running up. So Tue, thank you so much for sharing your information and your experience. It has been highly valuable to us. For the rest of you, we are still putting together the autumn program for the A2i talks. So please follow us on our webpage or on our newsletter, and we will announce the speakers for this autumn. But once again, Tue, thank you, and all the best of luck with your endeavor.
Thank you so much. Likewise. Have a good day.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you too.